Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore our relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, AC Staubel
and Isaac Hill.
Today on the Plant Cunning Podcast, we have Nick Cavanaugh of the Railyard Apothecary. Hi, Nick. How are you today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, doing pretty well, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you. So we have a traditional first question at the Plant Cunning Podcast.
So what brought you to the plant path?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, there's sort of a long version and a short version. So maybe I'll do a medium version, which is that, I just, after college and after doing AmeriCorps, I just decided I wanted to basically learn more about like working with the land, and did some farming internships. And one of those internships was at Tryon Life Community Farm out in Oregon, in Portland. And I had learned a little bit about herbs just from friends and a local teacher in Syracuse, where I'm from. But with that internship at an urban farm, I really got some hands-on experience with medicinal herbs in a way I really hadn't before, and was just so intrigued by that experience. I decided to learn more. And so I did like the internship at Herb Farm with a PH in Southern Oregon. And that was more immersive and had the farming aspects as well as the herbs. And then just wanted to continue learning more. Did Seven Song School in Ithaca after that. And then, I realized that it sort of like combined my interest with like helping people on an individual level with my interest in the environment and connecting people with the environment and helping the environment. And so just decided to take the plunge and did the Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism's 3-year clinical training program, and led me to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah, so kind of got into it through farming and working, hands-on that way with the herbs. That's really
Yeah.
awesome. And I also am a student of Seven Songs, and I remember looking at the program for Seven Songs and looking at the Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism and a few other herb schools that were like on the top of my list, but those were the top two for sure. And could you just speak a little bit about like what your experience with the Northeast School of Botanical Medicine in Ithaca with Seven Song was like, and then what was the big differences between the Vermont school?
Yeah, so Seven Song School in Ithaca was really great, and it was especially great for learning the plants in their wild environment. So, his training involves lots of time outdoors, wildcrafting, plant identification, going on these trips to different parts of the country and learning about the flora there. And I just really, really appreciate that I got that sort of immersive experience with wildcrafting and with getting to know plants in their natural habitats and gaining some botany skills. And then also Seven Song is just really well known for his skills with first aid. And, as part of the program, I got to do first aid at the Rainbow Gathering. And that's this annual gathering that happens in the woods at various places around the US. And being able to practice herbal first aid there was just a really cool opportunity to get some hands-on experience with herbs and herbal medicine, and in a way you see sort of like immediate results. And so the program in Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism, I did their 3-year clinical training program. They do have a program that's a little more hands-on in the garden. I didn't do that program, but the clinical track is much more sort of like academic in a way, in terms of lots of lectures and classroom learning, and is a little more sciencey, I would say, and more focused on the clinical experience. So that was just a very different kind of program than what I did with Seven Song, although we had clinical aspects of Seven Song School as well. It was just much more developed in the Vermont school. Also, there was botany in the Vermont school, but not as much as with Seven Songs. So the different emphases just sort of like yeah, allowed me to just learn about herbalism in slightly different ways.
Really cool. Yeah, it's awesome to hear about that. That's kind of what I was gathering from, reading about the Vermont school and then yeah, experiencing Seven Songs. It is very like hands-on versus like more the Vermont school seemed more academic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so then after you went to the Vermont school, did you just sort of stay in Vermont and started working at Rail Yard? Is that the progression there?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2016, and just due to serendipity in my last like 6 months at VCIH, Railyard Apothecary was starting to come together through this really interesting opportunity with a herb company, Herbal Moonshine, that had this sort of vision to start this project, but needed people to sort of make it happen. And so I was one of several people that got basically recruited to help start the project while I was in herb school. So I was able to sort of transition like pretty seamlessly, and quite fortunately to be able to do that work like while I was still in school and then immediately after graduating.
Nice. So
Yeah.
what is Rail Yard Apothecary?
Yeah, so Railyard Apothecary is a worker-owned cooperative, and we have three main areas of the business. One is a retail herb store, another is a clinic, and the third is a classroom and educational space. So yeah, our primary sort of like aspect is the apothecary, the retail sales, and we do a lot to connect local suppliers, local growers to the community through the retail storefront. But then we do have the clinical services and the educational services as well.
Cool. Yeah, and that's really cool. You're able to just transition like during, you had a job ready to go in the field that you were studying
Mhm.
immediately. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of clients there and you sell herbs. What are some of the herbs that you utilize the most at Rail Yard Apothecary?
Oh, well, there's a bunch. Some of the big
Yeah.
ones are nettle,
Uh-huh.
skullcap, tulsi,
Mm.
lavender, chamomile, rose,
Mm.
oat straw.
Cool.
Yeah.
So and where do you get those? You don't wild harvest, you don't grow or harvest all of those yourself, right?
Yeah, so our business doesn't do any growing or
Okay.
harvesting, but we work with local suppliers. So we get basically as much as we can from farms in Vermont or New York. And what we cannot get locally, we get from the big herb companies like Mountain Rose and Star West.
Cool.
And then
Yeah.
what about you personally? Do you have some herbal allies that you keep coming back to either, throughout your life or maybe some stars of the show right now for you? Like who are your plant friends that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, I usually keep my bottle of skullcap tincture at my desk, at least
Uh-huh.
for recently. I've, yeah, just try to keep that with me while I'm on my computer at work.
Uh-huh.
And I just find it really helps me get through the workday. It's so interesting because, it's sort of a relaxing herb, but actually like sort of paradoxically, paradoxically, I feel like it helps me like actually feel a little more like alert and energized a lot
Hmm.
of the time, just because it like takes the edge off of like that like overactive thinking and helps me focus a little more.
Yeah.
So that's a big
Nice.
one for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I can really relate to that. A lot of people do find skull cap to be more relaxing and sedative. And in a tea form, I do find that a tea, like a cup or two of skull cap as a major portion of a tea will make me want to nap or
Hmm.
just like go to bed. But the tincture does not do that for me at all. And I keep it in like my car in my herbal road dog formula with like a little skull cap and tulsi in particular is that like relaxes my neck to help those like driving muscles. And so I imagine at your desk,
Oh,
like you get a little tight bottleneck at your neck and then you're like take a little skull cap and it releases things and you're like, oh, I can think better now, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
guess helps with that vata, excess air happening.
Yeah.
You're thinking too much.
Yeah, and if you've gotten too many different directions, it helps you kind of focus,
Mhm.
which is energizing because you're not like dissipating your mental energy in too many ways. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sweet. Love talking about plants. Yeah,
Definitely.
so definitely. Yeah, so I want to talk more about Rail Apothecary too. So you've recently celebrated your 5-year anniversary as a business, as a collective, right?
We did. That was, let's see. Actually, it was yeah, so it'll actually be 7 years this June.
7 years? Oh, okay.
7 years.
Because we
Wow.
were
Nice.
sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We saw something on your website about like
Yeah, we still have the
uh,
5 year stuff on our website. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's even better, 7 years. But it was really cool for us to see each of those 5 years, like a little summary of the pictures and like the people in the space. It's a beautiful space that you have. It seems like it's like a really welcoming environment for learning about herbs and connecting with plants and with people.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how is Rail Yard Apothecary structured from a like a business standpoint?
Yeah, so we're a worker-owned cooperative. So we're a C Corp corporation, incorporated as a C Corp. And that means that being a worker-owned cooperative, the owners are the people that work at the business.
Mm.
So, in a traditional corporation, the owners and the workers are, not necessarily the same thing. But in
Mhm.
our case, like everybody who works here is on track to becoming a worker owner. So we have 4 worker owners currently,
Mhm.
plus 3 employees. And once somebody has been working here for a year, then they can basically apply to become a worker owner. And that means that like we who are the worker owners all share in the profits of the business. So
Mhm.
there's no distribution of profits based upon percent ownership, like in a traditional business. It's distribution of profits based solely on the number of hours you've worked.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so if somebody works 50% of all of the total labor hours of the year,
Mhm.
then at the end of the year, they would get 50% of the profits.
Cool. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was actually one of my questions, like with the 4 worker owners, like how do you divvy up the profits at the end of the year? And is it just like an equal thing? But no, it's based on like how much work you're actually putting in. So it kind of does that like make it feel more equal because everybody is like kind of getting what they're, putting into the business?
Yeah, definitely. It makes
Yeah.
it feel like, we're all working towards the same goal.
Hmm.
And that, yeah, you're sort of like rewarded based upon the effort that you put in.
Yeah.
So it's interesting though, because the worker owner model favors like the people working in the present, but the people who worked in the past,
Mm.
like aren't seeing like the benefits that have like come in the time beyond where they were working. So it's interesting, like just thinking about like, starting a business. Some people might feel like they can start a business and it's like an investment and they don't have to work and they will reap the benefits if it's successful. They can, you know, just sort of step away from it in the future. It's
Mm.
sort of the opposite with a worker-owned cooperative.
Mhm.
So for those of us who are here right now and who maybe plan to be here in the future, like it feels like very like fair and equal because we know that like the profit that we will earn is going to be like directly proportional to the amount of effort we're putting in the present.
Right. But then if a situation happens where you're starting one of these cooperatives and there certain people put in a lot of effort at the beginning, getting the business running and going and popular, and then they leave right before it gets popular and actually more successful, and then they don't reap any of that investment of time and labor into the future. Right. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that could be a downside, but it definitely seems like there are a lot of upsides too. So how did you come across this model? Like how did this begin? Yeah.
So I wasn't actually around when like the original worker owner cooperative model was created, because so Railroad Apothecary actually originally was just the herb store and the
Mm,
classes and not the clinic. And the clinic actually was incorporated as its own business a few months before the apothecary was. And my understanding was that the people that were involved in the clinic at that time were just a collaborative group. They wanted to collaborate together. Nobody, I guess, wanted to, start their own business. And so it just made sense for the sort of collaborative nature that
mm,
was being developed at that
Mm.
time. Interestingly, the apothecary actually started out as a nonprofit because we thought that, I don't know, it just made sense as a way to be able to be very community focused and community oriented.
yeah.
Later found out that we couldn't actually become tax exempt being a retail establishment.
Uh,
And so that's when we then merged with the clinic into one big work owner cooperative in 2020. And it made sense to us at that time because, there was this group of us all working together, and the same idea is probably they were thinking initially with the clinic, is that it just made sense given like the cooperative and collaborative nature of our work and the way that we work together to
Mhm.
have that reflected in the business structure.
Mm.
yeah, cool. I think I mean I find this very interesting and necessary too, because we've got problems with all sorts of our economic systems, whether you're more whether the capitalists own the means of production or the state does, it's not a good necessarily good for people working.
Yeah.
But we've got to try new things, and not even saying that this is a new idea, because it has been around for a
Mhm.
while and they're very successful worker cooperatives. But it's really good to see it happening because there are
Yeah.
also there are definitely some tensions. There can be tensions with it too, and obstacles. Do, like, what kind of obstacles have you run into, or have you run into obstacles over the course of this business?
Yeah, we've seen some obstacles for sure. So I think probably the biggest obstacle is that there are like challenges that come with cooperative and collaborative decision making.
Mhm.
And for a while at the beginning, it was pretty messy
Yeah.
because we were figuring it out and we didn't have like a clear structure. And so, people wouldn't know whose role it was to make XYZ decision. People would, just get confused about, you know, what sort of autonomy they had to make decisions. And yeah, since that time, like we have become like a lot more structured and organized. And I
Hmm.
think it does actually work quite well. So, but yeah, there's definitely been some bumps along the road in terms of just people having trouble with sort of interpersonal dynamics that have come up.
Yeah, that's definitely, to my mind, that seems like a one of the biggest obstacles to
Mhm.
overcome, because that's one of the benefits of like a hierarchical organization, is there's a clear like line of executive decision making,
Mhm.
and it can happen quickly and you make decisions, and and then I've also been part of like like Occupy or something, a making a decision cooperatively that just never happens because it takes 4 hours and you still haven't come to a decision about anything. So how did you become more
Yeah.
structured?
Well,
Like how did you navigate that?
what does that structure look like?
Yeah, so we were trained by this organization called Round Sky Solutions, and they specialize in sort of workplace democracy and creating collaborative workplaces. And so they have a very structured system that has like sort of step-by-step instructions for how to run a meeting, how to make decisions, how to use consensus. They have sort of a modified version of consensus called integrative consent, which is like, yeah, it's a little different from a lot of other consensus systems that are out there. And what I really like about like this system is that it sort of like has like efficiencies sort of built in, and it's so highly structured that it like deals with like ambiguity by like making it just more clear what to do. Like just as for one example, like you were saying, like the 4-hour meeting, I have been involved with organizations as well that have had very long, drawn out meetings. And we definitely have had some of our share of those sort of meetings here at Railyard as well. But just for example, like there's like a clear a process for making a proposal in which like you make a proposal, there is like just like one set of questions and answers. So like we just go around one time, everybody gets a chance to make a question or make a comment, ask a question or make a comment one time. And then the person who made the proposal has like the ability to either modify their original proposal or not. And then there's a round of objections. And the objections can't just be because somebody doesn't like the proposal. They have to be like objections on the grounds of it like being something that could like majorly harm the business.
Mhm.
And so it sort of favors quick decision making
Mhm.
with the idea that because decisions can be made quickly, they can always be remade in the future.
Nice.
So yeah, rather than like getting hung up on making the perfect decision, it favors just sort of movement forward and revisiting things in the future if need be.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. It like keeps it in the flow, keeps it moving forward. And then you're not like completely stuck, because some organizations, it's like, oh, you have to modify the charter to like address that situation that didn't work. So yeah, that seems like a really good method. And I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on like building effective team dynamics. Like, how do you cultivate accountability on the day to day with your team? And how do you just cultivate easy communication so that when things do come up, it's like resolved easily and quickly? Any team dynamic tips?
Yeah, with accountability, something that's also sort of built into Round Sky is a process during each meeting in which you report back on your like to-dos. So every meeting, we make a list of all the action steps that each person is supposed to take. And then we revisit those at the beginning of each future meeting to just briefly check in and say, oh yeah, I did that thing or I did not do that thing.
Love
And
that.
yeah, and the list is like a perennial list. So it just
Mhm.
is, if you didn't do it from one meeting ago, it'll still be there 2 or 3 meetings from now if you still haven't done it. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's sort of a nice way to like keep some accountability in that sense and just like building in a way to keep checking in.
Mm.
We also have regular, basically like staff evaluations that everybody is involved with that works with that particular person. And so there are sort of like some sort of manager-like roles,
Mhm.
but even those people in those sorts of roles are like evaluated by the people that they work with.
Yeah.
And so that's
Nice. Yeah.
another sort of, yeah, that's another way to keep accountable is to have like a regular process where people can like give and get feedback.
Mm.
And then there's also like processes that we have for resolving interpersonal tensions. And
Nice.
yeah, and we haven't actually utilized those probably as much as we could, but we have a bit. And just like everything else with like the system we've adopted, it's like very like structured and like clearly defined in terms of the process. So that helps keep it in a more sort of like healthy container, that it's not like an open-ended discussion for people to just go back and forth about like the feelings that are being triggered, but
Mhm.
it's sort of structured in a way that like the focus is just on sort of like one issue at a time, and it's just set up for somebody to listen to concerns that other people have and not to respond to them. So it's sort of like avoids like just a loop of going back and forth, and like just instead encourages just like the receiving of the feedback and letting
I
that
love
sink
that.
in, and then being able to return and give feedback in the other direction in a future meeting at a different time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That,
think that's so smart.
yeah. Because yeah, it's so much it's in the moment where you get the emotional reaction to the feedback, and then you say something that you maybe not even mean,
Yeah.
and then it just starts this back and forth
Oof.
of those emotions. So some time and space to like, gain clarity and come back to center and then listen, that definitely seems like a very helpful way to manage those sorts of
I'm just
circumstances.
like thinking
Yeah.
about all the times that I've received feedback and have had this like knee-jerk inflammatory, even sometimes internal, and I don't even express it, but like response of just like cringe. And then it settles in after a few minutes where I'm like, oh, they're right. They're right. Yep. We're dealing with
Yeah.
like trauma here and everyone's doing their best. And I'm really glad I didn't say what I did, or I'm really sorry I said what I did. So I love that idea of like, you're here to listen and absorb the feedback and like just process it on your own time. And then we'll get back to this next time. And that also creates the container of like throughout the space of time, a few weeks or whatever. I don't know what it is. If you do like weekly meetings and then like other monthly meetings, or
Actually, yeah, there's meetings for each like
it's like
scope.
separate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so basically there's meetings like every month or every 2 weeks, depending upon the scope. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like you have that space of time to kind of observe things with each other and then think about how to present it to that person in a compassionate way rather than like, you did this again, and like the inflammatory response that can happen when you're working with people day in and day out. But it sounds like you're really like creating this environment where people are feeling safe to share. And it's kind of cool that you haven't had to utilize the like structure for dealing with like conflict as much.
Well, I don't know. I think maybe at certain points we probably could have utilized it more.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. Well, it's there for you, right?
Yeah.
So is the reason that it wasn't used more like because it seems like it would take a long time to resolve a problem also, so like is it a matter of like getting that whole process started? It's like I don't want to go through the headache of that, or is it just it wasn't the tensions weren't difficult enough to
To
take it to
warrant
that
it.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's just that like we didn't even like really learn how to do this process until
Mm.
maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so it's that it has been unfamiliar to us, and it's still not super familiar to us. So I think we probably could have or would have used it more if we just knew how to do it
Yeah.
in the past. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool that you've been doing this for 7 years now. So you've had the time to work through some of the kinks too, because I know, a lot of collectives, fizzle out within the first year or two just because of, but
A lot
interpersonal,
of businesses
yeah,
too.
a lot of
Like, yeah.
businesses too, yeah. So I assume you continually are learning new things, but at a certain point you also kind of have it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the benefits that you see from a cooperative versus like a corporation?
Oh, well, just having more people involved and sort of like able to sort of follow their passion and interests. We've just been able to do so much more than we could have done, you know, as individuals, certainly. And, probably even if we were just organized in a different way, because, yeah, people just have like a pathway to sort of like bringing their interest and their passion to fruition,
Mhm.
because it is a collaborative structure and a cooperative structure. And so, yeah, we just have like a lot of pretty different aspects of the business. Like the clinic is very different from the education, it's very different from the retail space. But even within the retail, we've got, the local farms that are supplying the bulk herbs, but then people have developed relationships with local product makers. And we've got a whole herbal justice aspect of what we do, where we sort of fundraise to create a fund to make our products and services accessible to BIPOC individuals and to people who cannot afford herbs. That's a whole sort of
That's
project.
awesome.
We're a dispensary, so we sort of will like blend custom tinctures and
Mhm.
tea blends and powder blends for other practitioners, or for clients of our own clinic. And so there's just so many, and within each of these things, there's like, little projects within each of those. So
Mhm.
I think just that, like, having this collaborative structure is just so much more than like, a traditional like individual or sole proprietor or partnership, you know, could probably like do like on their own. And it
Absolutely.
just connects us, I think, with more people in the community, because everybody that's
Mhm.
involved has their own personal networks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
And different personalities themselves. So it's like different people are attracted to different practitioners, or folks working in the herb store can like get through to different people in different ways. Yeah, it's way different than just a sole proprietorship and like one person. You're way more limited in that sense. Yeah. And it probably is like keeps it. I imagine that collective businesses really keep the individual collective members motivated, because it's not just your business where you can kind of slack off and it's just affecting you. But when you're in a collective and other people are depending on you to do your job, and you see that to-do list in the recurring meeting notes, and you're like, it means so much more to like actually do the work because you're supporting these other people in your collective vision.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
So how how do you make sure that the things that nobody wants to do get done?
Oh,
Ooh, yeah.
that's a good question.
Like taxes.
Yeah. Well, the bookkeeping is my job, so the good thing is that like I don't see, that's the thing, because like, yeah, no, I don't really like love doing like bookkeeping and like tax related stuff,
Yeah.
but I kind of do. Like
There's a
I kind
gratification about it.
yeah, I find a
Yeah,
certain gratification in like just like the mathematical aspect of it. I like math. I like that it's just like very like clear, and you have a result like immediately. You
totally.
just do the thing. And
You're
so I
right.
think this is sort of like how it is with everything. Like there's things that some people like really don't want to do, but like I think fortunately there's some people that do. Like
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, like I'm not as excited about like pressing tinctures or like making products, but there's somebody that's really excited about that. And
Great.
so, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
And cleaning the bathrooms? No.
What's that?
What about cleaning the bathrooms?
Oh,
Oh, that's actually, well, no, that's a good example because
yeah.
number one, like anybody who's staffing the retail counter, which is all of us, we all take turns doing that,
Mhm.
has to clean the bathroom during their shift. And so we just rotate it through. So it's not one person having to do it all the time. And we also do contract out for a cleaner. And that's like, yeah, two things that we contract out for. One is like the deep cleaning of the whole space every week,
Yeah.
and the other is some marketing help. So,
Oh, cool.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good way to everyone's got to do it
Yeah.
when they.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm. So, do you want to share a little bit more about like your classes and the educational component? Because we haven't really talked too much. We've brushed on the herb shop and the apothecary, but what kind of classes are you offering and what does that look like? How often and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we've got an eclectic sort of variety of classes. Some are sort of like basic herbalism classes. A lot of the people that we serve are new to herbal medicine, and so we have, a fair amount of intro level herbalism classes, and then we also have special topics which are a little more advanced. We have stuff that's tangentially related to herbalism. So for example, just coming up, yeah, so the next event that we have coming up is a sleep clinic, actually. So it's sort of a hybrid class and clinic event where there's like a sleep presentation and then also one-on-one consultations. And so that's a good example of something that's sort
That's
of like
cool.
like intro level, how do I help myself with herbs sort of thing.
Mhm.
Next month, I think it is, we're doing a class on herbal abortion.
Mhm.
So that's with Ember Peters and some other folks who wrote this article for the American Herbalist Guild Journal, their most recent issue, which is just basically, I think, about how to think about herbal abortions
Mhm.
in a clinical way. So that's
Mhm.
like a much more specific advanced topic that's like especially geared towards people who are working with herbs in a clinical way. So those are sort of like two like opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like the kinds of classes
Mhm.
that we offer. And then yeah, there's also the classes that are like, for example, we're having a class coming up soon on Beltane plant lore of the
Ooh,
Celtic Isles, I think is the full name.
cool.
So it's more in the realm of like earth-based spirituality
Mhm.
and has some plant aspects to it, but more of like a spiritual thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And do you do it like once a month or so, or is it kind of just a sporadic schedule?
So it's kind of sporadic. So yeah, there's most of the year there's going to be something happening at least once a week,
Hmm.
but we'll have periods of the year where there's just nothing happening for a few weeks.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
cool.
right now there's at least one event happening through I think the end of June. So one event per week.
Nice.
Nice. And then what about the clinical aspect? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how many clinicians do you have and who are you serving? And yeah, what?
So that's cooperative too. So like if somebody comes to the same clinician every week, it still comes to go it is part of a collective payment. Like, yeah, how does that part work?
So it's all part of the cooperative. So
Okay.
we currently have two people seeing clients. I am one of those people, and there's one other person, and then we have a third person who is working in more of like a research role and is
Nice.
supervising our sort of like clinical roundtable, not supervising, but leading our clinical roundtable. So
Uh-huh.
basically, we have like at least once a week a roundtable to talk about cases among the
Awesome.
three of us, and sometimes we'll include other practitioners as well. Like we have other practitioners who are like renting offices in our space, like a naturopath or nutritionist,
Cool.
acupuncturist, and so sometimes they'll participate in those conversations as well. And
Awesome.
so if a client wants more input on the
Hmm.
case from the whole team, we can offer that.
Hmm.
And so it's not exactly that we're like sharing clients, like a client can just see whoever is
Hmm.
available, but it's that we have support from the whole team available if a client is interested in that. And then the payment structure and everything is all part of the cooperative. So yeah, the clinician is yeah, just another employee basically and
Cool.
or worker owner.
Hmm.
Yeah. That seems really helpful too, to be able to do the round table and everyone is being paid for that. Everyone's, input is valued
Mhm.
too. And a lot of times it's very helpful to have second opinions or third opinions and
Oh yeah.
bounce back ideas with other people. And it's probably helpful also to learn for like the more junior members to like learn how to
Mm.
how to do clinical work better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the Ithaca Free Clinic where Seven Song, is a practitioner of herbal medicine there, but they also have like acupuncturists and doctor MDs and naturopaths and Reiki practitioners, massage therapists, and they have like some longstanding clients that have come for years and are dealing with chronic issues. And once a month, they have a roundtable to talk about just those longstanding clients who have
Oh,
seen pretty much everyone there in the room. And you hear these like details that you didn't get from your intake with the person when they were in a different mind state with like so it really helps to like work together on that person because everyone has input on their healing journey.
that's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a really cool model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. We should have Seven Song back on and talk about the Ithaca Free Clinic more because it is another cool collective model. And I think people are really interested in how to start these collective businesses and work together collaboratively.
Collaboratively.
Sometimes words are hard for me,
Me
but
too.
yeah, but to work together on these herbal businesses or mutual aid efforts. And people run up time and again with conflicts, and hearing how you and Really Your Apothecary have overcome some of those, I think is just super helpful and can be applied to so many different business structures, not just collectives, but people are working with each other all the time on projects. So yeah, thank you for going into detail on all of that collective stuff with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other questions that people often have about your model that we didn't ask?
Hmm. I'm not sure. Maybe I would just add that, yeah, that there is like a structure and that there are roles that are like clearly defined. So like we don't have like a traditional like general manager that you
Mm,
might find in like a retail store, but we do have like an apothecary lead who
right.
is sort of like in charge of the apothecary to a certain extent. So there is like, just to say that there is still like some level of like hierarchy sort of, in that some people do have roles that have more decision-making power than other people, but that like the nature of the like structure is also horizontal in other ways, and that, you know, everybody is part of a scope, and
Yeah.
it's like means basically like a team, like a scope is sort of like a team
Yeah.
and has the ability to influence the whole. So I think that's, yeah, maybe a, not necessarily a question, but maybe a common thing that people don't know is that it's just like there is a structure to it. It's not just like, you know, everybody's all like exactly the same in
I
terms of
don't,
their,
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it probably wouldn't last that long if it was
yeah,
that way,
yeah,
but sharing the way that these are structured, I think is really helpful. And yeah, like having a manager or somebody in a lead makes sense, but then having them also get feedback from the people that they are managing is
yeah,
necessary, because I've had managers working in the restaurant business or wherever, where they just have a good power trip.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you kind of need some direction and somebody who in that role. So it's
yeah,
a good way to do it. But yeah, again, I think this is really helpful, and this kind of structure can be used for a lot of different businesses, whether it's an herb collective or like a permaculture, like a landscaping collective, or a
Homesteading project.
nursery business. There are so many ways to do it. Yeah.
Go villages of like collective living together. Like
Yeah.
there's more and more of that popping up too.
Yeah, and that's
Cool.
those another thing that often fails because the
Unfortunately, yeah.
structures aren't thought out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's one other question is like, yeah, so how do you fire somebody? What if you have to fire somebody?
Oh.
We fortunately have not had to do that.
Mhm.
Nice. So good hiring procedures.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Um, but there is a process. It's in the bylaws. So that's an example of something that's like outlined in the bylaws because it's such a sort of fundamental question to exist as a business.
Yeah.
And so it's basically that it's just basically says that the board of directors, which is all of the worker owners, has the power to use our decision-making process, which is integrated consent as described by Round Sky, to remove another board member if needed. So it would just be like a proposal, like any other proposal,
I see.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. Yeah, this has definitely been very interesting. There are a lot of worker cooperatives and some successful ones, but like not that many. And it's great to be able to talk to somebody who has been a part of this and practicing this for a number of years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just offer too that
Mhm.
it's worth sticking with it
Oh,
because the financial rewards are not a lot in the beginning.
right.
Yeah.
Especially with starting a worker owner cooperative that you can't like just get a share of profits if you put in money. You need to actually work.
Mhm.
So it's like it's not necessarily financially rewarding right away, but
Right.
like having a long-term vision and being
Mm.
able to like see that long-term vision and just stick with it is, I think, what does make it work.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have any other tips for people who are thinking about starting a workers cooperative?
Yeah, well, just know like the like find out the information. Like there are specific things that are really helpful to know. And the United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives is probably one of the best resources nationally. In Vermont, where we are, we have a really great organization called Vermont Employee Ownership Center, which is just fantastic. But I mean, we made mistakes in how we structured our business. We structured it as an S corp. It should have been a C corp. We didn't really have good accounting advice from the beginning. There are like accountants that are knowledgeable about worker cooperatives. Wagner CPA is an accounting firm that knows this stuff really well. For the bookkeeping side of thing, there's an organization called A Bookkeeping Cooperative, ABC, that knows that end of things. So yeah, just like really finding out what is the correct legal structure, how to set up the books and the accounting from the beginning is really important because we wasted a lot of time just like not understanding that. And I'll just say too that it like the other good thing about this model is you really can do a lot without necessarily a lot of resources. Like we were lucky that we had sort of this initial investment that didn't come from any of the people that were involved in doing the work. But, I can imagine we could have done the same thing if like, there was close to a dozen of us at the beginning. If each of us had put in 500 or $1,000 or a couple $1,000, we probably could have accomplished, close to the same thing without having that outside support at the beginning. So just the ability to pool resources, if people don't have, a ton of access to capital to start a business, it just makes it quite possible. And it's really something that like makes it so people can do so much more together than like anyone could necessarily individually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point that, even if you have several people that have a little bit of upfront money to put towards it, you can also pay them back even at interest if you want. As the collective grows, you'll get that initial investment back, and you're building in your future. So that's a really good point that pooling your resources can, make for actually a really productive business together, where one person's resources maybe wouldn't have gone as far. So,
Yeah, totally.
and having all of your accounting ducks in a row and your structural things and having your like vision and all of that written out, and your operating agreement, or I don't know what you call it, but like your kind of manual, having that all, I'm sure, really helps when it comes to like the things that can come up in the future that can cause a little conflict, or when people want to leave or move, what all of that being spelled out is probably really important to have from the get-go when you're working with people in a collective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if people want to find out more about Railyard Apothecary, and if they're in Vermont and they want to come see you as their herbalist, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so our website is railyardapothecary.com, and all the information is available there. We're also on Instagram and on Facebook. We're located in Burlington, right near downtown on Battery Street in the actual rail yard. Hard to find with Google. It doesn't always map people correctly because of the fact that we're not really on a real road. So we have a video on our website for how to find it and on our directions page. And yeah.
That's how all the cool places are. A little hard to find, but worth it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge, and it was really cool to hear about your experiences with Railyard and your history. So thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.